Welcome back to Self Transformation Radio. I'm super excited today because I have not done it yet, but I'm about to interview someone that I met on TikTok. His name is Matthew Ulk, and you may know him from TikTok as well, Mind Over Matthew. Matthew has gone through a lot of amazing transformational changes over the last few years. In fact, in November of 2022, he had a transformative experience that I'm going to talk to him all about. And it inspired him to leave behind a corporate job, a very cushy, secure job. He moved out of his house in Chicago into a van like mine. And yeah, he's been embarking on a journey like no other, something that he certainly didn't expect probably 5 years ago, even 3 years ago. So we're going to talk to Matthew about his transformation, about his spiritual awakening, the same type of spiritual awakening that made people think I was going crazy. I love talking to people about having gone through similar things and what they're doing now and how their heart and mind have changed and expanded, transformed for the better. So I hope you enjoy this interview with Matthew Ulk. I will put his link in the show notes so you can contact him. And of course, his TikTok is amazing. He's got lots of inspirational videos about all kinds of stuff, spiritual. And of course, there's even some van life stuff on there. Enjoy. You've been in Croatia for like 2 months now.
Yeah, I have quite the story over here. It's pretty wild. Oh, there you are. Yeah, so I came here. So I met with one of my clients that I was working with coaching. She found me on Instagram and we started working together, and she's in marketing. So she's a chief marketing officer, and she is going through her own spiritual awakening journey. And we got to talking, and then we were like, well, let's trade services, right? Like, I want to build my brand, and she needs coaching services. So like we ended up within this great friendship. And one day she was like, why don't you come to Croatia and we can like do all this, like work all this out and like really work together. And I was like, sure. Like there was something in me. God was like, yeah, say do it. So I came here, and like our friendship has now blossomed into like a relationship, and it's crazy. It's so nuts. And she's flying back with me to America.
Oh my
In
gosh, Matt, that's so amazing. And I saw that your video about you're like, I don't, maybe I'm not gay or whatever it was. Like, that's so interesting. I'm so interested
Yeah.
in that sort of thing because like there is so much stuff that can shift. And what I've learned about the brain and how your hormones can be influenced by a brain that's not healthy if you're using substances, which I was for a long time. I think that there's something in the water, like they're poisoning our food, they're poisoning our
Yes.
water over in the US. So like you get out of there
Yes.
for long enough time, like it's no wonder people are starting to shift out of that.
Yeah, and I've had I've had like two Kundalini awakenings while I've been here, like just been here. And when I say that, I just mean like that energy in the base of your sign, it just shoots in your head. Like, because how it happens to me when I'm just like laying down, and I'll lay down and get into a meditative state, and then I'll just feel it, and it'll just take over my whole body. And then one night we were both like on the couch, and like something like took over my whole body. Like I went back, and like that's when I told like the whole TikTok of like I started like I thought it was like seizing because I didn't have control over it, but I just kind of like I've gone through 5 plant medicine ceremonies now, so I've learned the art of surrender to just kind of let whatever's happening happen. And it's been extraordinary. It changed my whole brain, like my hormones, everything. It's just like boom, changed. It's so crazy.
Certainly have
And
a
that's
like a clean glow about you. Like you're just kind of vibing differently than you have in the past. And I guess I've watched your videos for a couple of months now, or at least maybe even 6 months. It's been a while. Uh,
yeah, it's
and
it's been
something
wild.
about you is different. Like there's just a vibe that's
Yeah,
different.
and even like I noticed like my masculinity has even like changed. Just even like in my personality, like I embody more of my masculine. Whereas like when I was holding on to all of that trauma and that guilt and that insecurity, right? Like that kind of, and I had like deep feminine wounds too that were like caused by my mother and like my first girlfriend and things like that. So it's been a crazy journey out here, like wild.
So when are you guys heading back?
2 weeks. So it'll be 2 weeks on Friday.
And where are you headed to?
Michigan.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to Michigan this summer. I
Really?
will meet you guys. I would love to meet you guys in real life. I'm in the
Yes.
van and I'm gonna be on the TV show Staycation. They're filming it in June 8th, but then after that, I'm gonna be leaving Florida and I don't really have a schedule. So I'm just in my van. And
Yes.
are you guys going to be in the van or?
Yeah, I'll be at my parents', but yeah, we'll have the van and everything. We should totally meet up. We'll be in Michigan from June to like August, mid to end of August.
Yeah, that sounds really fun. I've never been there and people keep talking about it and I keep meeting people from Michigan too. Like I've been
Yeah.
exchanging coaching services with another friend of mine that I found on TikTok as well. I keep meeting amazing people on TikTok and people that's why
Right?
people want to ban it. That's why they want to ban it. Because I
Yep.
keep meeting amazing people and
Learning too much.
Michigan too. So yeah. And he needed business coaching and marketing and stuff like that. So I was helping with his funnels and stuff. And I just needed to like vent about like my dating life, which is non-existent right now because I keep going back to like this is your time to be on your own. And I've started
Mm.
to think about getting in a relationship. And I'm like, that would just slow me down. And I finally blocked my ex. It felt so good. It was the easiest thing I've ever
Mm.
done. Before it was so hard to just let go. It's like the season of letting go, right? We're letting go of our
Oh,
securities, our old beliefs that we've
so
had
much.
for ourselves. Yeah.
So much. And I see like the astrology of it playing out in there. Like I've always like I know I've never really connected with like astrology until like now when I'm actually feeling the real shedding and letting go, and it's almost like instinctual. It just begins to happen and it just becomes like a part of you, and you just step into that embodiment of that new you that God is calling us to be, and like just walking it out.
Yeah.
It's wild.
So what is your, I guess, girlfriend's name?
Layla.
Layla. And you guys met on Instagram or she was a client of yours at one point
Yeah.
and you
Yep.
started exchanging services and she invited you to Croatia and you went because like why would you not want to go to Croatia? It's been on my bucket list for a while. And then you guys are
Oh,
falling in love. It's so beautiful.
we keep saying we're gonna write a book because like this whole trip has been a movie. Like it's been a movie. We went to Tuscany, like we went to like different places in Italy. Like just the experiences that we've had have been extraordinary. Like the life over here in Europe is so, this is my first time I've ever traveled international too. So the life over here is so much more laid back and slower, like slower paced, where in America we're just constantly go, 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 do, do, do. And here, like they're drinking coffee and having Aperol spritzes and at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, like just really relaxed, and they have like breaks in the middle of the day to shut everything down in different countries over here, and it's just a much more relaxed pace. You can tell that the it's much calmer than how we're wired over in America.
God, tell me about it. It's a total 180 from what we're conditioned to believe is important here. Like we are told that our productivity is paramount, our achievements, our performance is paramount, and it's dog eat dog. And even
Mm,
this week, I've been really conscious as I've stopped. I used to smoke a lot of weed, like from age 30 to
mm,
37, and I'm 37 now. So about 10 days ago, I was like, you know what? This isn't serving me anymore. And
yeah,
I dropped it, and I am not on any substances. I got rid of
nice.
all my Adderall, and I'm feeling so much better, but at the same time, like it's causing the stuff that all that stuff over the years, big or small, I think has been suppressing. And so I've been feeling like tightness in my throat. Not right now, but at night when I go to bed, it's like that's when my mind decides to start working. So I've been
Mm,
really digging into, okay, how do I, for years, and maybe you have a similar story from before your spiritual awakening, where I would kind of poo poo on meditation. I can't just think about nothing for even 5 or 10 minutes. Like, that's not productive. It's such a waste of time, you know? And so I'm like recognizing all those old patterns that just want to keep coming back. And it causes things like migraines. It causes,
mm.
like, I'll just be laying there and whenever I'm thinking, I stop breathing. And when you stop
Oh,
breathing, it's like you're breathing, but you're just like allowing like tiny sips of air to go into your lungs. And it's like, why,
yeah,
where is this coming from? Like, why
yeah.
is this in my body? And I think it's been like that for a long time. So but with drugs, it will suppress that. And I'm
Mm.
grateful for what I've been able to recognize in myself since giving up the substances. I'm excited to see what happens as a result of
Oh,
that
yeah.
too.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
see what comes up. And I still smoke. Definitely, I'm still a smoker.
It
Weed.
feels so good. It feels so good, but then I think I get so attached to the good feeling that I'm like, I want to feel like this all the time.
Yes, it
And
can be
then it
dangerous.
starts, and then you notice like after a week of smoking regularly, I am not productive. My van is a mess. I don't want to cook.
Yes.
Ordering DoorDash all the time. It's I'm overeating and I've gained 30 pounds in 3 years. And I'm like, I know this has to do with because it messes with your dopamine receptors
Yeah.
over time. And it's the same reason people gain weight on antipsychotics is because it messes with your dopamine receptors and you become reward seeking because it's like something's off up there with too much use. And I wasn't using it ceremonially. I wasn't like hanging
Mhm.
out with friends and we shared a joint, right? I was buying three giant joints at one time and smoking them consecutively for 2 weeks or a week and a half.
Oh, I feel that.
And it's like I want to be in this space all the time. I feel like I drop the inhibitions and I can make even more amazing TikTok videos or I can
Yeah.
write. I started 3 or 4 different books and then I let stuff come out of me, but then it's like a mess and I feel like it's not effective anymore. So I'm curious to see what happens. I want to feel more comfortable in my body. And ultimately,
Yeah.
I think I got to the point where I was using substances so much that I felt clouded. And that was why,
Mhm.
because I started using it to deal with anxiety from being unaligned in my old life. And I wanted to stop drinking alcohol because I realized I was drinking alcohol to suppress how I was feeling. And
Mm.
so I was like, oh, I'm going to try CBD, which led to THC, which I think between 2017 and 2020, there was like a lot of fake cartridges out there and I was vaping,
Mm.
right? And I think there was something in there that caused me to really go off the rails and have hallucinations that are not
Ooh.
normal for any type of cannabis use. And I was describing
Wow.
this to my friend who's my interior designer. She was an ex-drug addict and she told me that was not weed that I had. And so I've been kind of dealing with that stress. It's like, as I had a Kundalini awakening and it was like, I think it was precipitated by my divorce and then
Mm.
probably overuse of marijuana, like that
Yeah.
traumatic experience. And then, yeah, it was like I wasn't the same person. I felt like I had woken up from a dream because all of a sudden I knew things that I didn't know before. And I'm like, what the heck is this? And everybody thought I was crazy. And I got forced into the
Yes.
mental hospital. Did you have to go into mental hospital?
No, but my at first my mom thought I was having a manic episode because I had my Kundalini awakening in my second meditation because mine happened spontaneously, right? Like I was like going into the end of 2022, I broke my wrist and sprained my ankle because I got really drunk and jumped over a fence, and that kind of pushed me into this like like just kind of analyzing myself. And then I looked up Dr. Joe Dispenza. I saw him on a YouTube video, and then I bought his book, Becoming Supernatural. And I thought, like, I was deep in the matrix before this, like JP Morgan, working in the corporate culture. Like before that, I was in mortgages, slinging mortgages. And so I had no idea about anything. Like I was like, if God is real, then cool. If he's not, cool. I hate religion. Like they're all horrible people. Like I was very divisive. I was your like matrixy gay man that was successful and angry at the world and traumatized, right? And had nothing, knew nothing about the world. And so then I started learning about ancient aliens and I was like, wow, this stuff is intriguing. Like and so that like started the awakening. And then I read Dr. Joe Dispenza's book in a week, and I sat in my second meditation and had my Kundalini awakening, and I felt it, and like it sent me on the floor, bawling my eyes out. And I called my mom, and I was like, "Mom, Jesus is real." It's like I knew the story of Jesus once it happened. I was like, "Holy cow, we're all Jesus. This is crazy!" Like,
I
and
thought
it's
I
like,
was Jesus. I literally thought I was Jesus. And I was like,
so,
maybe I'm Jesus's wife. I was so trying to figure out what it was. Like I had this new information, and then people just thought I was nuts.
yeah. Oh, yeah. And I feel like that's a part of the awakening journey is when you initially have that awakening, it's almost like a savior complex, or like you think that you're like, am I the Messiah? Like, am I
Yes.
God? Like, is this me? And then you're like, it's you really can think that and convince yourself that because you think like, oh, like this is the secret to the entire universe. I got to share this with everybody. Like this is so I totally felt that same way too. I was like, am I Jesus? Like, am I the incarnation now of Jesus or something? But we all are. Really, we're all our own different versions of the Christ, right? Like Christ wasn't his last name. He was the Christ. He attained the Christ consciousness that we all have the ability to attain. And
Yeah,
so,
I've been loving your videos about Christianity, and I've made a couple of my own. I think largely encouraged by your bravery and courageousness to go out there and just say the things.
yeah.
And I was in the church for a long time, and I have figured out, similar to you, like that the church has subverted Jesus's actual message. And to me
Mm,
now, I find it insane that there are people on this earth, and I used to be one. I can't say that I really believed it because I always felt like there was something wrong with believing that we live on a planet in which if we don't believe in the blood sacrifice of a man to who is God to a God who was that man, like it's just this convoluted mess that somehow
yeah,
people believe that's the world that we live in. And if we commit the finite crime of not believing properly and not hearing and not confessing, not inviting Jesus into our hearts when Jesus is already there. Like the Christ is
right.
already in us. And he was trying to tell
Yes.
us, like, hey, the power of Christ is within you. And I and the Father are one does not mean I am God. It means I am in union with God. It's totally different. And how it's all been manipulated.
Yeah.
And people just think I'm the devil when I tell them that. It's, no, you are operating from fear, and fear is the opposite of faith. Fear is faith inverted, and I
Mm,
will not buy into this dogmatic nonsense that was made up by a bunch of old white guys in what is it, the 5th century or whatever, the Nicene
yeah.
Creed that they repeat. And I think maybe it had good intentions, but the Bible, I remember reading it the first time after my awakening, and I was like, this is not like what they're teaching in church. And when I realized
Yes.
Christianity and Jesus, we're talking about two different things. What Jesus,
Yeah.
have you read any of the Nag Hammadi scriptures? Like the
I
Gospel of
haven't.
Thomas? Dude, you would eat that up. It's like I have a copy in the van even. It's like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Peter, the secret book of James, or I've probably butchered that, but there's so many like stuff books of the Bible that were left out. And it's just like, this is the stuff. This is the stuff. It's
Yeah.
talking about how the Old Testament God is actually Satan.
Hmm.
Really interesting stuff. I find
That's part of the Gnostic teachings, which I don't know about you, but I'm feeling like the call to Christian Gnosticism. And it makes so much sense to think like the Old Testament God, the Yahweh, right? The Yahweh God is like they call him the demiurge,
Mhm.
where it's part of this Abrahamic religion where God is like this almighty being that is looking down upon you and watching your every move. And if you don't believe in the atone, or if you don't believe a certain way, then you're going to go to hell. And it's like that's not how God operates at all. God is just like saying, come to me as you are, right? Whereas this Abrahamic religion and other religions say like you have to repent, you have to get rid of all this ugliness and this nastiness of what's wrong with you, everything's wrong with you, and then God will love you. But in reality, God's saying, come to me as you are right now and
Yeah.
watch me transform you, right? And it's not like whether it's right or whether it's wrong. It's just saying, open your heart to me with pure intentions for the healing of humanity out of unselfish love for the common good, which is what I always say. And it's just like you signal that to God, then God's like, you got it. You got it now. You're not operating out of the like, we have to kill each other and believe in the atonement of a blood sacrifice for all of your sins, past, present, and future. Like, no. And so I don't know. I think from what my spirit is feeling, I feel like we're going to see an increase in like religious wars and spiritual war, like all of that sort of stuff. As the love increases in the world, right? The chaos is going to equally increase in order to prolong the awakening. Because I don't believe that it can be stopped. I believe they can prolong it, but I believe this ripple effect, like once we really start getting out there, because I'm feeling the push and the call to push myself out there even more and to even like just start praying over people, like not in the Christian way, but like we can truly heal each other through the laying on of our hands and speaking faith into other people. And I think once we get a taste of that and begin to learn how to do that through our own individual journeys, I think it's over for the Matrix. You know what I mean? Like it's crumbled when they realize like we all start just going out into the streets and healing each other and like just really watching God move. Like that's just like that's what I feel and what I see, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I mean, we are healers that and we have the power within us to heal. And even Jesus said it's your faith that's healed you. And the concept of faith has been subverted slash inverted. I'm not really even sure what the right word to use there is, but the Christianity, churchianity is what I like to call it.
Yeah.
They make it seem like faith is believing the correct way. Your faith only
Mm.
matters if it's faith in Jesus. But Jesus didn't say that your faith, he said your faith has healed you, your belief, the power of the belief. And so much of this awakening is not becoming someone new. Yes, your mind is being renewed and saved from the sleep way of living, the matrix way of living, but it's remembering who we truly are, that we are
Mm,
a piece of the one true consciousness, that we're a piece of source energy. And in remembering that, we can heal ourselves. Like Joe just,
yeah.
I just finished watching, or almost finished watching, I got to finish the last episode, Rewired, the show on Gaia Network with Joe Dispenza.
Mhm.
I haven't read Becoming Supernatural, but I've read Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. I really want to go to one of his retreats and I want to learn the meditation. So let's talk a little bit about meditation. How do you meditate?
Yeah, so I just sit because I feel like in the beginning we have such a disgruntled relationship with meditation. We sit down in the first 2 minutes and then the thoughts come up, and then, nope, I can't do this. But the thoughts are coming up, and that's part of the meditation, right? Like that's why we meditate. So I meditate by, I just sit down in a comfortable place. And in the beginning, I wanted to light my incense and my crystals, and those are all like great, but I really try to approach it for people that like you can sit in a desk chair, right? And sit down and meditate, or you can lay down. But I mean, and I do lay down, but you just have to be mindful of falling asleep. But I just sit and I meditate. And I over the last few months, my internal monologue has like shut off. Like the voice inside of my head is very, very, very quiet, unless like I hear something like from God, or if I choose to think something, or if something does come up, I have the ability to like thought stop. Like I've done really well at being able to just stop those thoughts and detach from them and be like, oh, those thoughts are not coming from you, from me. It's like the enemy inside of you that's always going to be there and behind you, sometimes whispering in your ear, but you don't have to listen to that voice, right? Whereas everybody just listens to every single thought that they have, producing an emotion off of every single thought that they have, and then acting on those emotions, which are the majority of the time fear, anger, or grief, or shame, or guilt, right? And those kill the spirit, that kills the soul, that stops your Kundalini from rising into the heart space because we're not letting those emotions come up and addressing them and detaching from them and purging them and releasing them. They just get thrown back into the subconscious and that energy can't rise, right? So, yeah, meditation. I mean, and I meditate probably, I would say a few times a week. I don't even meditate every day really anymore. And I do like a good hape meditation, like the smokeless tobacco that you blow up your nose sometimes. But I think in the beginning, I was meditating like 40 minutes in the morning, 40 minutes at night. And I've kind of just tapered off with it as much because I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say that I don't need it, but I don't meditate as like every single day, but it doesn't even take that long. That's what people don't realize is like it's just sitting there and just being aware. That's it. Like just aware and observing everything around you without judgment and allowing anything to come up and then just letting it pass. And so that's just kind of the wisdom that I've come to understand is like when we get to that space of silence, our nervous system is like, okay, we're good. Like I can release. And I think that's part of the Kundalini awakening, right? I think the Kundalini awakening is the stimulation of the vagus nerve. And so I just believe that when we settle our nervous system and we no longer think we're getting chased by a lion in our lives, then it kind of releases and then our body can return back to balance and harmony in which it was supposed to do in the first place, in the beginning in which we were created, right? And then that begins like the whole transformation, depending on how far you want to run with it. For me, like I have this desire in my heart to just like change the world. And I know that I'm not going to be the only one to change the world, but I know that many of us out here have to hold that vision in order to change the world. You know what I mean? And I desire for stronger spiritual gifts. I desire for a deeper connection. I always say that I live to have my belief systems shattered by truth. Like I live for it. Like I live for the fear. I live for the discomfort. I live for the like just all of it. Like shatter my belief systems with truth always. Like
What you're saying about how the shame, the fear, the guilt, the anger that a lot of people are stuck in. I teach that in the retreats that I do. I'm doing one with probably like 12 people this weekend because I neglected to realize it was a holiday weekend. So most people are like, either A, I can't afford it, which is just sad to me, but it is what it
yeah.
is. Or And those are the people that need to be there, the ones who are like, I'm poor. Like, you don't realize that you're calling yourself a victim and that you're perpetuating that, and that by staying in that energy of victimhood, you are creating a literally, it's not even just a spiritual thing because it's all connected, right? It's physically creating hormones in your body called catabolic hormones like adrenaline and cortisol that are stripping you of energy that you could use to make your life better. So that's what the Transform Retreat's all about. That's what I teach people
It's
and like a beginner level, right? Where I'm talking to me 5 to 6 years ago who would have been like, what? Everything's energy? No. Or your thoughts create reality? No, reality is just reality. But
Yep.
thoughts really do create reality because they create our feelings. And then from our feelings, we take action that creates a reality that we end up in a cycle. And we've spent so much time, so many of us, in that lower energy zone of the victim or the fighter. I have little archetypes that I use. So the victim and
Mm.
fighter energy zones where that we convince ourselves that is the only reality there is. And then we waste our lives thinking that's what it is. So when talking about purging emotions like this, and we can do this in meditation, we just allow them to come up and we don't let them control us. And then they lose their strength over us. They lose their power over us when we just let them merge out of us. Because I think a lot of people think meditation, you just sit there and nothing happens for however long. But really, what's happening is you're allowing things to regulate and things to move in and out of your system, new things to come in and old things to move out, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I know what I said, like I meditate like 3 to 4 times a week, but I've come to like this understanding like you can meditate anywhere too, really. Like walking to when I go get a chocolate croissant down in the city of Zagreb. Just it's all about just constant state of presence, right? And just constant state of awareness and just being totally immersed in the reality that you're in and not creating fake thoughts and fake emotions up in our head. And most people are just so completely unself-aware. And it's not their fault, right? We were born into the system that has like said, okay, this is the blueprint for life. And if you follow this, you will be successful and you will have everything that you ever dreamed of, right? Chase material possessions, social status, go to school, go to college, and then we have all of these like these I don't can't even think of the word, but like restrictions or like these rules and that you have to follow in order
Program.
to yeah, programming, right? And that creates somebody who's just completely unconscious, right? And so you don't even people most people just aren't even aware of the emotions that they're feeling or the thoughts that they're thinking. They just allow them to run their entire life. But it's like your emotions don't have power over you. You have power to the reaction to the emotion that you feel in every given moment. And if you don't give that emotion a reaction, right, like fear, well, then that emotion becomes weaker and weaker and weaker. And then eventually you look at fear as something you want to crash into and you want to dive deep into because it's like, no, you're not, I'm not running from you anymore. I know what you did to me when I ran from you my entire life and it made me sick. So it's like you're presenting yourself for a reason, we're going to address it. And because it's not going back into the subconscious.
Dude, talking about making us sick, that's ultimately what happened. I couldn't accept my awakening, or I could accept it, but nobody else around me could. So essentially, I was being gaslit by my surroundings and the
Mm.
doctors, and they were trying to tell me I had a genetic disorder, bipolar disorder, which is, I mean, I did have some symptoms of bipolar disorder, but they're not genetic. Bipolar disorder, and this is where I started my TikTok channel, was about, and my even my podcast was all about these misdiagnoses where that adrenaline, that stress can lower your immune system and allow viruses and all this stuff to grow when we're living out of alignment with who we really are, when we're not in tune with our environment, when we're just totally unconscious, right? We create
Yeah.
this stress dust cloud is what I call it, the catabolic dust cloud that is just stripping us. And then when
Mm.
we're in a state of depression and anxiety, we're either depressed about what happened in the past, so we're not present, or we're freaking out about the future, so we're not present. And it's impossible to be happy if you're not present. Like you can't
Mm.
enjoy life if you're in a hurry. So that's kind of my mantra now. And I even have a sticky note on one of my cabinets in the van that says, there is no hurry, none,
Mm.
because that was my jam, right? My grew up around my mom just hurrying all the time, and I got all kinds of different diagnoses on top of I got ADHD, OCD. I got scars all over my arm from just ripping myself up, which is a symptom of OCD. And I thought I was a narcissist for 2.5 years, but I was in fact surrounded by them, letting them run my business and all these things. I got a cancer diagnosis and all these things that happen. And you had asthma, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had asthma for my whole life. Like I was born and on inhalers and steroids and breathing treatments. Like every fall, I would get an upper respiratory infection that I would have to get on steroids. And 2022, so I had my awakening November of 2022. So like the full year of 2022, I was in the hospital 4 times. Like the doctor said, like you've been on steroids so many times this year, like we probably shouldn't put you on them because you can only be on steroids so many times before your body just doesn't react or respond to them. And yeah, like in an instant, like, and that's what people don't realize. Like in an instant, I felt my lungs open up. Like I literally felt my lungs opening up and healing, and then no longer on an inhaler. You can't fake that, right? Like I can't fake not being on an inhaler. I would die, like because I couldn't breathe. You know what I mean? So you can't do that to prove a point. So that was really the biggest thing that kind of like sent this aha moment. It's like, wait, I can breathe. This lung disease, I don't know what you would call it, was plaguing me my entire life, right? And then boom, it's gone. So then that was like, I have to pursue whatever is happening to me until the very end and share that with the world because we are suffering so badly. So many people out there are just suffering so badly and they don't know what to do and they look to these politicians that will do absolutely nothing for you except promise you things that they will never deliver on and they just want to keep us separate and divided because when we're sick we're profitable, And so when we're healed, I mean, what is Big Pharma going to do? They're going to go bankrupt. And so it just tanks the entire system. And so I'm here to watch it crumble. And I think that it will crumble in our lifetime. I think in the next few years, I think it's going to get pretty wild. But I think that's why it's so important for our awakening journey is to build that faith and that trust. Because when you have this sort of like awakening, you no longer go from identifying with this meat suit body, right? You identify with the eternal aspect of yourself. Like I'm constantly always thinking about like I identify with my eternal soul now. And so when you identify with that eternal part of you, that unconditional loving awareness, it takes the pressure off of life and you can just be in there, there's no like criteria or like things that you have to meet in order to be successful or to be somebody in this world. I mean, I just want to be. And so I would say like after a year and a half, like I'm still kind of in burnout recovery because for 31 years, I've lived with so much trauma, emotional abuse from my parents, and just the trauma that I put myself through in my 20s with my relationships and the nasty person like that I was. I'm still like it's been a year and a half, but I feel like I'm still just recovering from the burnout. And when you figure out all of this truth and this deception, there's like a stage that I feel we go through of just this anger. Like you're so angry with the world, you hate the world, like you just want it to burn, like you and that was a part of my journey that I had to learn that I had to let go. I had to forgive. I had to understand that this is the world that we live in and we are called to change it. And most people are just waiting on somebody to come save them to change it. And I believe that's why the whole, the narrative of Jesus being a blood sacrifice and he will return is just to keep people in a state of waiting and hoping for something that's never going to come unless you go within because the return of Christ is inside of you.
Exactly. And giving, and it conditions us to give our power away. And this whole idea of we are nothing but for Jesus, like Jesus saved a wretch like me. It's like, no, Jesus is trying to tell us that you're not a wretch. So stop treating yourself like one. Don't listen
Yes.
to people who are telling you that you're garbage and that you're
Mhm.
powerless and that you need to have permission and authority over you at all times. Like we're born into this weird system where the government is entitled to or believes that they're entitled to
Yeah.
percentage of everything you make. How is that not trafficking? Because if you
Uh,
don't give them your money, then they're going to ruin your life, really? And so we're paying them money under threat and duress. Again, how
mm.
is that not trafficking? How is that not involuntary servitude? And when I realized that, I was like, how can I unsee this? I can't unsee this. And
Yeah.
it's hard to conform with something that you know is wrong. And I felt that way about the church. I feel that way about like our tax system, like our tax farm that we live on. It's just
Mm.
it's totally messed up, and there's a lot of fear there of like disconnecting from those systems, of course. And it took me a long time to start speaking out, especially because I'm still friends with a lot of people that I went to church with back in the day, and I would write stuff on my Facebook, for example, as like my little journal, and talk about how I am no longer a Christian. But and people would just like freak out about that because they hear what they want to hear and they
Yeah.
start figuring out like how you're wrong, and they don't actually listen. It's like people, it's like that sound of silence. People who have ears but don't hear. They're hearing but not listening.
Yes.
And yeah, and then that's what I noticed. Is like, wow, you guys, and I don't know if you've heard anything about what happened with JP Miller and Micah Miller, who killed herself up in, it's actually south of where, or north of where I am now, Lumberton, North Carolina, where she died. And that church was just eating up. There was so much footage that came out about the stuff that he was saying. It's clear that he's just spouting out word salads and people are just eating it up. And it's like these people are at a church with a wolf in sheep's clothing on the pulpit, and they don't even realize it, and they think because they believe in Jesus that everything's good. And that's what
Yeah.
I thought when I first became a Christian when I was 13 or 14. I'm like, oh, thank goodness I found the right religion, I don't have to worry. And then
Yep.
I was convinced I was going to hell. This was in my period of, I guess, being in denial of my awakening and really feeling disempowered and being not recognizing the toxic relationships that I was in, not just being so scared and so depleted, right? Because burnout is a physical condition. If your brain does not have what it needs to function properly, it's not going to function properly. So I wasn't thinking clearly. I, of course, was on Xanax because the anxiety was so high, not realizing that the anxiety I was feeling was my nervous system and overload. And of course, viruses can get in there and start munching on things. I had to get hearing aids. I had no idea that viruses could like
Oh,
infect your nerves. And of course, if you can't hear properly, that's going to add to your depression, your anxiety, and you can't have conversations because you're always three sentences behind trying to figure out what somebody was saying and you think it's you. So you turn inward against yourself and you hate yourself and you just kind of like propagate this nasty cycle of feeling like totally powerless. And that's essentially, I think, where they want us to be. They want us to be in that state of powerlessness. And ultimately, I think that's where depression is. I was talking to somebody who has a consulting business and all of her clients are doctors, and she said 60% of our patients are depressed. And I was like,
mm.
that's, and they want to be put on medication, but the doctors don't want to keep them on there because they're not long-term fixes. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been, I mean, when it comes to Christianity, especially, I feel so liberated having left, but it's so wild. Like, you've seen it on your videos. I know you have, because I've seen the comments where people are like, oh, you're going to hell, ha ha. And that's a Christian. That's a
Yeah.
Christian saying
Yeah.
that, or somebody who believes they're a Christian. And just like, wow, what a
Yeah.
mess.
Yeah, and I would get so like in the beginning like frustrated because I felt like you also get into this point where it's like you really just want to get people to listen and you get so frustrated when they can't see and it's so clear to you and I, but it's so muddy for them because there's that veil over their eyes and then their fear. So anything that anybody, has been programmed in the Christian community, when they feel the feeling of fear, they automatically associate that with evil and the devil. But really, that fear is coming up for you to lean into and for you to take off the blinders and step outside the box that religion has put you in, right? And to explore, but they've been conditioned to think if I go outside of this box and explore, then I'm probably going to go to hell. So it's just, I've just given those types of people so much grace, right? Because we, I can understand and you can understand, we can understand like where they're coming from. And you almost develop this deep empathy for people who are just so blinded in this world. But I feel like eventually in the coming months, even that the world and people as a whole collectively are going to experience some sort of Kundalini awakening, some sort of energetic change and expansion of consciousness in their mind, whether they've pursued the healing journey or not. And so if you've clung on to fear and you feel this happening within your nervous system, you are going to freak out and just be so fearful. And then the government's probably going to be like, oh yeah, we have a new medication for you. Like, and it's gonna just be so insane. Like the world that we live in is insanity sometimes to just think about it. But then, yeah, and then you have these leaders at the front of the churches, right? That had to get their degrees, had to get, their scholarly whatever it is that they had to get in order to teach this message when they're not even really filled with the Spirit. And so, like me, I love the Bible. I had a really tainted relationship with the Bible, and because I thought it was evil. And yeah, I do believe that it was manipulated to water down spirituality. But when I read the Bible after my awakening, I was like, holy cow, like the Spirit is the Spirit of truth, which we all have access to, this Spirit of truth, where this divine wisdom, this divine understanding, this knowledge, this faith, healing, prophecy, tongues, all of that is very real. But I feel like you only become equipped to understand and interpret the Bible when you are filled with that Spirit. And that's what it says, right? It says when the Bible is used for law and order, which is to demand, to reveal your sin, right? Reveal what's wrong with you, and then demand to be obedience, that kills. But the Spirit gives life. And that's what we speak. We speak the Spirit into the world. We speak faith into the world. And it's not just Christianity. Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, they all have these beautiful paths to God by these prophets that were connected to God and told their people in their own way. So if we could just like step out of that box and recognize like, wow, all of these different religions have something so beautiful to offer. And then in addition to our own awakenings, right? Because we're essentially rewriting a new covenant, which is what it says. Like when the old covenant has been like used and abused, and man has manipulated and deceived people out of God's will and law, like purpose and in the Spirit, then it's time to create a new covenant. And I think that's essentially like what's happening is we are beginning to create a new covenant to bring forth into the world, because clearly the greedy masters at the top haven't done it correctly. And you can't beat God. You can't beat the universe. Like everything is always going to maintain balance and harmony, whether you are ready or not. Right. So if you're stuck with a dysregulated nervous system, the darkness will literally drag you down with it. What will that look like? Cancer, autoimmune diseases. People will just become this cesspool of suffering. But then you'll have these people simultaneously who are just literally performing miracles, right? Like, and helping pull those people out of the darkness. And that's kind of what I've understood my journey to be, is like I see these souls like just in this fire, and I'm just like snatching souls out of the fire all over, like to just get them to realize like you are so powerful. God lives within you, are Christ. Like, so it's just wild. Like I think about it, I probably say that this is crazy 20 times a day. Like this is just insane. What even is this world that we're living in? How did we get here? But you just got to enjoy it while we're here.
We, I guess, chose to come here. And you mentioned something about I think it's going to happen in our lifetime. I agree. I just feel it. I feel
Yeah.
that things are changing. I feel time speeding up. I feel the old ways of doing things are bubbling up, and it's just we're all connected in the quantum field.
Yeah.
So as more and more of us wake up, we're going to hit that critical mass, and everybody's going to wake up. And God
Yep.
is love, and love always wins. So there's no way that this
Yes.
sin is going to last. It's not real.
Yeah.
Eventually the light is going to turn on. That was when I was right before I went into the mental hospital the first time. I was like overcome with this, like, oh my God, Jesus is real, like the whole my Jesus thing. And I'm the light. You just have to turn on the light, and then you can like find your way. And it all made sense to me, but it made no sense to anybody else at the time. And
Right.
we just get like caught in these bubbles of belief systems, and we are so used to informing our own opinions and beliefs about who we are based on what other people have reflected back to us. And so I think for me, I was spending a lot of time thinking that I was just average, normal, whatever, but there was always something inside of me that was like, you're meant for more, you're supposed to do more. But then I would feel guilty, especially growing up, wanting to do more and feeling guilty because I wasn't grateful for what I had. But it's
Yeah.
not bad to want more, especially if that's our birthright. We're in this world of abundance, and we recognize that we're holding ourselves back in some way to unleash ourselves, to literally unleash ourselves, like take the leash off and to just be. And as I because I have severe burnout, and they say it takes like 3 to 5 years to recover. And I didn't really start recovering until May of 2022. So I'm not even 2 years in yet. And I asked my guides yesterday, I started channeling in my journal, like my guides, because I guess that's just the way I do. I'm a writer. So I
Good.
asked, like, how far along am I to the healing process? And they said 65%. And I feel like I'm about 65%, which I feel so grateful for, but I get ahead of myself. I get ahead of myself
Yeah.
and I'm like, I should be farther along by now. But then I have to remember, like, no, this is the process of like healing, and you're right where you need to be. And to slow, it's all in order to retrain myself, to unlearn the hurriedness, and to retrain myself to slow down and just be, instead of feeling like, even with launching my new brand, I launched selftransformation.com in March, and my old habits from my former business that I sold in October of 2022, I sold it and then I took some time off, and now I'm finding myself going back to those old patterns of, I gotta do this and do that, and I pay this person to help me with this and they're not doing it, and then I write an email at like 9 o'clock at night about what I want done because it wasn't getting done right, and I can't believe I'm paying for this, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's an old pattern. And that sort of stuff will like lower my immune system, create the stress all over again. And then I find myself like, you just feel that energy. And it's an opportunity for me to recognize it and just purge it when
Yep.
it starts to come up. Because that's when I would reach for the substances, Matt. That's what I would reach for the substances, was when I was feeling that stress and I didn't want to feel that stress anymore, instead of just facing it and figuring out what it was there to teach me. And
Yep.
that's to be, instead of living in the future. Because if I'm freaking out about a business thing or something with my clients or design or emails, like somebody writes me a mean email or something and that like gets to me, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. It's just a
Yeah.
distraction. So
Yeah.
recognizing all those distractions, and I think that's why meditation is so valuable, because it allows us to become aware of those distractions, and then we can disconnect from them. And instead of thinking that we are the clouds floating through the sky, we can say, oh no, I'm the sky. Like, I'm the sky.
Right.
And the clouds are just
Well,
kind of
that's a
through. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I always say. I always tell my mom because my mom struggles with that, and I'm helping her through her like healing journey. And it's amazing because she's like on the verge of a spiritual awakening. And I feel like when I come home with Layla, like she's gonna experience it. I can just feel it, like it's so strong. But I always tell her, like, you're right where you're supposed to be. Everything that is happening is meant to happen when it's supposed to happen. And it was something called something optimism, where no matter like what happens in your life, you just practice radical acceptance of like, okay, God put this barrier or obstacle here, like it's presenting itself, like this isn't going to be here forever. This is a cycle that I am meant to break through and work through. And then there's going to be mountains in the life in my life that I'm gonna, that I'm gonna climb. And then there's going to be valleys. And so like you just kind of just radically accept all of it, right? The suffering, the sadness, the joy, the gratitude, the abundance, the connection, the disconnection. Like you just embrace everything in life. And I feel like that just makes it so much easier. And from the outside looking in the Matrix, people are like, you're delusional. You have to control everything. But in reality, I'm over here healed or healing, happy and whole. And when you said it takes 3 to 5 years for burnout recovery, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm only a year and a half in. So like, but
I'm right with you
it's,
though. I'm right with you. And I think there's things like meditation and what we're choosing to put in our bodies and what our environment is and who we hang out with, like those things can speed it up a lot faster. I think
mm,
that we can definitely accelerate it. I mean, the fact that I'm 65% healed from that and it's our only been less than 2 years, I feel like I'm doing pretty
amazing.
good. Like, I think
Yeah.
by time next year, my platelet count will be back down, because I got diagnosed with a rare form of blood cancer that is related to lymphoma and leukemia. And I thought, because my platelets had gone down so much last year, that they would be normal by this time this year. But no, they were back up again. But I've been smoking a lot of marijuana at the time. I had been not eating right and I had put on some more weight. And so I was like, no wonder. So it was a wake up call. And
Yeah.
you're right, everything does happen for our good and we can transmute all that pain. I mean, I know I went through the depression and suicidality that I went through so I could get out of it and then help all the people that are convinced that they have depression like it's some kind of disease. And it is, in a way, a disease. It's a thinking disease. And it can cause
Mm.
us to, like, if our brains don't have what they need to function properly, then they're not going to function properly. Our brain is connected to our nervous system. I believe it's one organ. And if our brain is sending signals to our other organ systems to create the hormones that the rest of the body needs, even if you're having a problem with your thyroid or your heart or your liver or something like that, it probably has to do with the brain too. Like you're probably going
Oh.
to feel depressed no matter what kind of illness you have. And speaking of illness, I'm curious, since your Kundalini awakening happened in 2022, what was it like during COVID for you?
So I had my first time ever getting COVID was 3 months ago.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, and also, so I was so deep in the matrix that I got vaccinated as well. So like
Oh,
I'll admit it, I did get vaccinated, but it wasn't too bad for me. But I have learned that different blood types don't get it that or like are resistant to it. And my mom, she's Rh negative. And that's a whole nother story, like the rhesus factor, where if you're Rh negative, there's a lot of people that experience these awakenings. And also if you don't have the Rh factor in your blood, it means that our blood was like genetically modified 200,000 years ago by something, right? Because in order to have the rhesus factor, it means you have to evolve from monkeys. And I don't even know if I believe the evolutionary theory of monkeys, because then why aren't there half human, half monkeys running all over the planet? But my experience with COVID wasn't too bad. But then I randomly got it like 3 months ago, and it was like death. Like I was down for the count for a week. But other than that, like but I haven't even been sick. I haven't gotten sick since my awakening, like besides when I got COVID, but like I've noticed that my immune system is so resilient, right? Like I just feel stronger. I feel healthier. And like even if you go out and like I mean, I don't drink that often, but like you go out and you have a couple drinks, like you just recover from things even faster. But it makes sense because you don't have all of those emotions, right, stopping you from recovering. And those emotions are literally, I believe that most diseases and autoimmune diseases like stem from some sort of emotion, that emotional trauma that we're suffering. You have people that go to the doctor and get put on all of these sorts of medications. Sorry, I keep shaking my screen. They get put on all of these medications and they're still suffering. And I read a meme today and it was like, if you've gone to the doctor and put on all these medications and you're still suffering, then I can guarantee that it's probably some deeply emotional rooted trauma that you have suffered, because it all starts from the unseen, right? Our thoughts begin to manifest our reality. So if our thoughts and our emotions are suppressed, well, then they manifest into the physical body. So, but yeah, I didn't have too horrible of an experience with COVID, surprisingly.
Yeah, that's great. I think you're right. You're spot on though. Like you were taking care of your immune system, and so your immune system took care of you. And it's like during that whole debacle, which I think everybody figured out, it was, well, I shouldn't say everybody figured it out. There's still people out there who are getting their booster shots and whatnot.
Oh, my grandma's on her 17th booster or something
Oh,
crazy. Like, it's
that's
insane.
crazy. Is there anything in
Hey.
them now? But like, yeah, they realized that it was having to do with the election. People are starting to realize, like, oh, my immune system, they didn't even mention that though in the news with like, oh, this virus is out. Like, of course, wash your hands, but putting on a piece of cloth over our faces was a more effective solution than going to the core and improving our immune system. In fact, they took certain things off the shelves like NAC, N-acetylcysteine, which is something I take every day. It's supposed to help with your immune system. They took it off the shelves because
Hmm.
I guess somebody was starting to say that it could help your liver, which can help your immune system. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Medical Medium. You would love him. You would love him. It's a book series. It's 8 books long. In fact, the whole second season of my podcast, I'm going through the book Brain Saver, and it's a really long book, so I eventually got bored with it. But Medical Medium is a medium, and he's been doing it since he was 4 years old, where he was sitting at the dinner table or breakfast table with his family, and his grandmother was there too, and he heard a voice outside of his ear, his right ear, and it told him to get up and tell his grandmother that, or say to put his hand on his grandmother and say, Grandma has lung cancer. And it took him a few tries, but he did it. And everybody's jaw dropped to the floor. And like a week later or so, they get results back, and of course she has lung cancer. And then from then on, he's like able to read people and figure out what their issues are. And all of his books talk about the real causes of these illnesses and the fact that there's a classified medical industry that's a puppeteer behind our doctors that are only told what they want to, that what they are supposed to know in order to keep us sick and to keep the system going. So chemotherapy does not work. Most people die from chemotherapy before they would actually die of the cancer that they have. They're not talking about the real causes of these cancers being viruses. They're not talking about how viruses live in our system, and if we feed them, they say that viruses are dead, but they're not. That's how they replicate. That's how they grow. They are alive, but not in the way we are. So if we're feeding
Yeah.
ourselves poison, and these viruses used to be like the garbage men of the body, so they used to be friendly. But now, because our food system is just so full of toxins, and our air is full of toxins, our water is full of toxins, these viruses, and of course, the
Mm.
stressful state of our minds and our total being, these viruses are allowed to grow and proliferate and completely take over our body, causing these autoimmune disorders that have no cure, causing these mental illnesses that have no cure. They tell you that they have no cure, but they don't know the cause. It makes absolutely no sense. So that's something I'm really passionate about, because my life was almost ruined by doctors telling me that there was no cure for what I had, and it never made sense to me. I'm like, you're telling me that at 31 years old, I now have bipolar disorder, a mental illness that I'm going to have lifelong care for, and I have to be on these damaging medications that cause like tremendous weight gain and all this stuff because I can't get rid of this, but I didn't have it before. Like, none of what you're saying makes sense, but that's what they're taught. And these
Yeah.
psychiatrists, and people comment on my videos all the time, like, well, what's your credentials? Like, you don't, like, you're not a doctor. What do you know? But the doctors are indoctrinated. They are
Yeah.
indoctrinated. And it's a Rockefeller-based system where they've suppressed the
Mm.
true causes, they've suppressed herbalism and all the alternative medications. They are pseudoscientific. They're the real quackery. And of course, the real doctors, a lot of them love Anthony, who wrote the medical medium books, but they call a lot of the mainstream medical people will call him a quack because
Mm.
he's speaking directly against and promoting people to start juicing, like drinking celery juice, taking these different tinctures that are antiviral, eating a lot of fruit instead of being afraid of fruit, telling us why people are like married to the keto diet and how that's actually damaging to the liver because the liver is supposed to process out all this fat. So reading those books really opened my eyes to what is happening in our world with the health system and why they want to keep us sick and this causes of all the stress. And talk about emotional stress and burnout. There's a whole chapter on burnout in the Brain Saver book where emotional stress and trauma, going through like hospital visits, things like that, can actually damage our brains. It heats up our brain, and if we've got heavy metals in the brain, then that can damage the brain tissue surrounding the heavy metals and cause symptoms that mimic ADHD, bipolar disorder. But when you heal the brain, everything takes care of itself. And when I learned that, I'm like, oh my God. And psychiatry, that's the one I have obviously the biggest beef with. Psychiatry is the only medical profession that they don't even look at the organ that they're trying to treat. They don't even look at the brain. It's absurd. And people just eat it up like, oh my gosh, like it's in the DSM, the statistical manual of mental disorders. There's like so many mental disorders, but they're making them up so they have more to bill. It's all to make money.
Yeah, and then we just begin to identify with these disorders, right? Like I have anxiety, I have bipolar disorder, I have this, I have that.
I
So then it
am.
becomes,
They say I am, which is just like terror. I am ADHD. I am bipolar. I am so ADHD. And it's exactly what you just said. It's the identity. They make it their identity, and that's what ruins people's lives.
yeah. And then we're conditioned to just trust the medical experts at the top. And even like the medical experts, you can see like they have this sort of sense of authority. Like I went to school for all of these years. I know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? If you're talking about anything else, like God forbid we say soursop tea has 10,000 times is 10,000 times stronger than the chemotherapy that's killing people. You know what I mean? Or genuine, but they're just so programmed to think that like these pills and these chemicals are what's going to heal the body when literally every herb, I believe that there is a cure for every single disease that grows on the planet, right? Like we were given these fruits and these vegetables to consume and to make these tinctures and medicine. Our food is medicine, right? But we've just been so programmed and just to believe this insanity. It's insanity. There was times where I would have to like stop myself because I'm like, this is enough to make me go crazy to see all of the things that they've done to people. And that's where my big heart like comes into it. Is like, what kind of person, could would do this to treat humans like nothing, like we're just cattle. You know what I mean? It just goes to show the complete lack of human empathy that some of these leaders at the top are possessed to just grow these different types of foods that are with full of these pesticides, knowing full well that it's going to get us sick, and that's what they want. So then we can go into the hospital. It's just an insane system to just harvest everything, our energy, our sickness, just all of it. And I live to see the day that it just crumbles.
Yeah, I'd
Like
be real mad if I'm 95 and not, it's even worse. Like, I'd be real mad. I just don't think that's gonna happen though.
I think that it, so what I always go by is like how humanity operates in cycles, right? Like we can learn from our past because we can learn from our history because we never learned from our past. So we always repeat it, right? What is happening in the world? Everybody is awakening the Jesus within them. What did they do to Jesus? They tried to stop him. They killed him. They suppressed him. They created new guidelines, like the Vatican just came out with new guidelines to how to address supernatural apparitions and phenomena. I believe that is exactly, they're doing that because they know that the awakening is coming. They know that people are going to be out in the streets healing other people. Like I was reading the guidelines and it said, when a supernatural phenomena takes place and an act of devotion starts to arise, they want to make sure that they stop it as much as possible. Because if you see somebody out on the streets healing somebody else, that draws too much attention to that person. And then the bishop in that area has to investigate the situation and they're going to deem what's supernatural and what's not supernatural. When these people aren't even filled with the Spirit, they're going to decide what's the Holy Spirit and what's not. No, it's just your contingency plan to stop this awakening from taking place and to manipulate the masses because they're going to trust the people at the top. I mean, and the Vatican is one of the most evil, corrupt places in the world with 3.5 miles of what sacred texts that they've hidden completely from us. It's wild. But I think that, in my personal opinion, and I don't think a lot of people, I don't know if there's a lot of fear or things of that nature, but I think that what we are doing is a very bold and a very courageous path. Obviously, it's the narrow gate that the Bible speaks to. It's really going against the Roman Empire. And I do think that they will try to stifle us and stomp us out and do what they did to Jesus. But I think that you have to develop on this awakening journey this just sense of conviction, right? That's in your testimony, that's in my testimony, to know that this is the absolute truth. And when you identify with your eternal soul, you're not afraid of death anyway. And to be honest with you, like, I know that the afterlife is probably going to be a billion times better than what's here. So I'm willing to put it all on the line. Like I even said, I'm willing to be a martyr for my faith. And so if I make it to 95, like I'll be so happy because I mean, in this next 60 years, I'm spending the rest of my life to just tank this entire thing, to completely just expose the truth. And I don't see how this could go on for 60 some odd more years just by gauging the amount of conviction and like just need and desire to expose and to help people heal and to just really bring forth the presence of God into this world. And I know that I'm not the only one, right? You and like so many people on TikTok that I have met that are going through this. And I think too, like us speaking our testimonies in the way that we do allows more people in the world to build the confidence and the courage to step out against society because we're doing it. Like just like you said, you saw that I made a TikTok and then you made a TikTok. And so then it gives people that permission to say, okay, like I'm not doing this alone. So some people have to take this bold stance, and I think they'll try to stomp it out if people get too big of a following or things of that nature. But I mean, that's from what I've learned and from what I've seen and how humanity cycles over and over. I can just see that's how it's going to happen. They know, and they can know by what happened 2,000 years ago. So they're more prepared for it now. And however that plays out, I'm totally fine with. But if I gotta be, I don't think I'm going to be hung on a cross or anything, but like whatever happens, I'm willing to risk it all because it's the right thing to do. You know what I mean? And we should always do what is right and what is good, no matter the consequences that come with that. Because like at the end of the day, it's what God is calling us to do. You can feel it, I can feel it. And regardless of how it turns out, like we're all meant to just create this huge ripple effect to lead this planet back into balance and harmony. And I don't, do you know about like the 12,000 year solar cycles? Do you follow any of that sort of stuff?
I've
Like the,
definitely followed some of that. Yeah, I've been through a lot of rabbit holes with that. Yeah, it's
like,
exciting.
yeah, like suspicious observers, do you follow them at all?
But that sounds really familiar, so I probably have seen their content pop up.
Yeah, and I'm like segueing, but like, you know how the Earth, the electromagnetic field of the Earth is weakening, right?
Mhm.
At an alarming rate, right? Over the last 200 years, it's decreased like 25 to 30%, but in the last like 25 years, of that 25% has been like 20. So it's like rapidly declining. And the sun is becoming more active and the electromagnetic poles are flipping. So we're also going to see cataclysmic events taking place all over the world in our lifetimes, like from everything that I've been researching. So it just shows like if we're all out of balance and harmony, then the earth is out of balance and harmony because she can feel what we feel, right? And if we feel disconnected and anxiety and stress, we are the virus on her skin. So she has to cleanse herself in order to maintain balance and harmony on this great earth. And we think that it's just the earth. The earth is billions of years old. You don't think that she's developed wisdom and interconnectedness within herself to create weather events to wash people off of the map. And I believe too that if we create this ripple effect and awaken humanity and maintain balance and harmony within our civilization, then the cataclysms to come won't be as drastic because I think that God can feel that. God can see that. Like we're all called to be kings and queens, sons and daughters of God on this earth. And when we do that, it'll restore balance and harmony, and the planet won't have to shake the flies off of her back. And sorry, that was a rabbit hole
No,
that
I
I
love
just.
it. Do you think that I mean, I feel safer being in a van because I can like leave in case things
Mhm.
get real bad. And I almost feel like, so in keeping with how we both awaken and having this like, it was just very sudden and this feeling of we're here to have we're here with a purpose and we just know what we're here to do all of a sudden. I almost feel like the path that we're on now, I do feel this way, is meant to protect us, feel divinely
Yes.
protected. I feel that I don't have fear that anything bad is going to happen to me because my purpose has not been fulfilled yet. But if it does, oh well, like you know.
And I don't know what prophecy it was, but it was a Native American prophecy. I follow, her name's like Stephanie White Buffalo or something on TikTok, where she said that when we go through these cycles, right, and we awaken and we develop this intuition and this guidance system, that guidance system within us leads us to the next destination that we're supposed to go through. And so let's say like you're in your van and you're like, man, you know your guides tell you like, oh, I got to go to wherever, and then you answer that call and you listen to it and you go, and then you realize where you were at, something maybe catastrophic happened. And that's what that the prophecy says, is that the earth, she communicates with us, it guides us and protects us to keep us safe on the planet, moving from the next destination to the next destination, and we're always going to be safe and protected. Now if something crazy wild does happen, I think you and I both have just come to the understanding that we've, I personally, in my 32 years, I've lived, and there's nothing that I would be like, man, I really wish I would have done, maybe skydiving, but like I'm totally happy in like, that's what's crazy about this awakening is it just like removes the fear of death. I almost am like excited to see what comes next. Like I don't want to go anytime soon, but like I'm stoked, right? Where most people are terrified of death. I've died in my freaking plant medicine ceremonies and not literally, but like literally went to the underworld and thought that I died in a changa ceremony and like went through the whole feeling of what it would feel like to completely die. It was terrifying, but it was so liberating and beautiful after the ceremony. So it's like you just don't look at death the same way because we're eternal. So what is there to fear? It's just rebirth, right? Like with every death that we have, there's a rebirth, right? It's just at the end of this life, it's pretty dramatic. And that's what we've been fed is like, oh, a funeral, we must mourn, we must be sad and grieve. And it's terrifying and it's bad. But really, we're just being rebirthed into another reality that in remembrance too. Like I feel like we'll die and then we'll just remember everything that we were and be like, oh,
I can't
that
wait
wasn't
to
as
remember everything. Like I want to remember what it was like to make the decision to come here. And I think that it was also part of Jesus's message. The purpose of his resurrection was to show us like, hey, you don't have to fear death. And people just misinterpreted that as, oh, because he's God, he came back and he's gonna save us. And he even called us like brothers and sisters too. So
Mm.
there's just so much that was messed up, and he was just trying to tell us that we were just like him and that we could reach that same level of consciousness if we break apart from these religious authorities that are just trying to control us and tell us that we have to be a certain way. I
Yeah.
feel so happy to be out of that. And Jesus was assassinated. He wasn't sacrificed. He was not like he wasn't part of some divine plan that God had from the very beginning to like fuck up all of humanity and then save them with himself with a blood sacrifice to make us all right. Like it's just insane. I believe that.
How maniacal is it to twist a story of a man who loved people and humanity so much to free them and liberate them that these masters at the top took his story and completely manipulated it and watered it down to use it for their own personal gain?
Brilliant.
It's
Diabolical, but brilliant.
it is brilliant. Like I will give it to them. It's brilliant, but how insane is it? Like you spit on his name. Like that's the way that I look at it. And I'm not too vocal about like and I'm starting to be more vocal about like the injustices taking place in the world and like being okay with speaking about it because I feel like in the spiritual world, especially like the New Age movement, it's like I have to be non-dual. I have to be complete states of peace. But it's like, no, if I feel sacred rage and anger at the injustices and the genocides that are taking place in the earth, and you know that it's wrong, that's where that's where God's judgment comes into play. I'm not God, but that's what God would judge these things. These are wrong. And it's okay for us to believe in that duality of good and evil because it exists. And how do we bring forth more love into the world with that and not call out the complete deception that's taking place, right? And then to speak the truth, I think there's a fine line, right? Where we're not breeding chaos, but we're speaking truth. And even if that truth is something people don't want to hear, it sets you free. And most people need to hear the truth, but most people fear the truth. I don't think the world's ready to hear the truth. I mean, even to experience what we've experienced, that awakening inside of you, that Kundalini awakening, that energy is so intense and so powerful. It is enough to make somebody go crazy. And I think there are many people in mental institutions in the West that have experienced an awakening, and our medical system is just so flawed. And they just say, well, you're schizophrenic, you're this, you're that, let's put you on this medication and completely numb your mind. When in reality, they were being restored back to their factory settings. They just didn't know what was happening.
That's exactly it. And that I think that's what happened. There were so many thousands and thousands of people put in mental institutions. Like I want to say it was about 100 years ago. And I think and remember all the orphan trains? I don't know if you heard anything about all the orphan trains. And there's theories that those kids that were orphans were actually stolen from the parents that were forced into mental institutions because they were trying to suppress a version of history that would have told us more about who we actually are. Controlling our perception of history is the best way to control us. And then, of course, the Rockefellers came in
Yeah.
and institutionalized everything,
Mm.
suppressed all the real causes of stuff, and basically just wiped out our understanding of the fact that health is balance in the body. And the way to cure an illness is to not put a synthetic drug into an organic being. It's to restore the balance within the body. So identifying the source of that imbalance, and it's so logical. It's so logical. But of course, if it's going against the grain of what we've all been indoctrinated to believe is that the man in the white coat or the woman in the white coat has the authority, and to answering the question that people ask all the time is, well, what authority do you have? What are your credentials? And I'm like, well, has your doctor ever healed anybody? Has your doctor ever been through what you're going through? Has your doctor ever been through and healed from what you're going through? I have. So I look at my pure raw experience of recovery from multiple things that were incurable as more credentials than any degree could ever get me. People are like, oh, you should go and get like a naturopath. But even that's been corrupted. Even that is they're spreading around theories of autoimmune theory, and Anthony talks about this in his books, that the autoimmune theory has been basically accept it as fact, but your body is way too intelligent to attack itself. It only looks like it's attacking itself because the doctors aren't looking for a virus. It's actually attacking a virus that they're not looking for. They do a blood test and they're like, "Oh, everything looks good, but the virus is in the organ. It's not in the blood system." And so
Mm,
the virus can literally burrow into and like drill into your thyroid and nest there. It can
mm,
be in your bone marrow, it can be in your liver, and it's not going to show up on the blood test. So it's just
yeah.
archaic, our system. And it's so freeing to know that. I don't have fear of cancer. I don't have fear of disease, even though I have technically a diagnosis. I know in time that my platelet count is going to be back to normal. I don't fear any of it. I don't fear it progressing. Even though my doctor tried to put me on chemo, I was like, no, no. And I needed the wake up
Oh,
call to see that it wasn't gone yet. I needed that wake up call, but that's what pushed me to get rid of all the substances and get rid of anything that was causing unnecessary stress and see what happens. It was really from an experimental, like, I just want to see what happens if the substance and all these other substances that I had on and off for the last 7 years, if I just go back to my baseline, because I had been taking some kind of substance, whether it was alcohol or a pill or a plant medicine, microdosing or whatever, consistently for 7 years. And alcohol was the only thing up until 30. But before that, it was nothing. And I feel like I was more effective then. So it's like, what will happen to my body, to my brain? How much space will I create with that
mm,
clarity mentally and see what happens and see what
yeah.
happens? Yeah.
Yeah. Have you heard of like soursop tea or genuine Ethiopian tea?
Yeah, I have. I don't know how to get it though. Like, can you buy it online?
Yeah, you can. There's an herbalist that I got it from because so herbs were another part of my awakening. When I went out into the backyard and found mullein, which is
They
like
say that.
the
It's
best plant
great.
for your freaking lungs. I was like, man, I suffered my whole life with asthma, and this weed, right, that grows alongside of the road is one of the best things that you can take for your lungs. So like that was a huge awakening for me. After my awakening, I was like, holy smokes. Like, so I bought I have a pound of cayenne pepper in my RV. I got 6 months worth of genuine Essiac tea. I have a bag of soursop tea because I'm like, maybe somebody in my family is going to get cancer and I'm going to be able to help heal
You
them.
have an
So if you can find
apothecary.
it, yeah, if you can't find it, I got some in my van for you when you come to Michigan.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm looking forward to it. And I want to say thank you for being on the show. And then we're going to go like on record so we can talk more personally. But thank you for being on the show. And I hope people listening to this episode of Self Transformation Radio loved it. You can find Matthew's contact information and links in the show notes. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks again, Matthew.
yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me.